Hi everyone. Tonight, we're going to step into a city full of marble dust, sandal straps, and political backstabbing. Florence, Italy. Right at the moment, everything changes. You're standing in the middle of a square that smells faintly of fresh bread, horse manure, and wood shavings. It's loud. People are yelling about wool prices, Latin philosophy, and who's painted what on which chapel wall. The sun glints off the red terracotta rooftops. And somewhere nearby, someone is building a dome so big that most people think it's going to fall in on itself. Spoiler, it won't. The Renaissance is not polite, or tidy, or quiet. And you probably won't survive this if you keep making eye contact with that monk over there. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Post your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing who's drifting off from where. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's enjoy our ride tonight. You've been dragging your feet through the narrow, winding alleys of Florence, kicking up dust and pebbles. It's the early 1400s, and you're not sure whether this is the most exciting or most dangerous time to be alive. Either way, you're definitely in it. Everything smells like beeswax, metal filings, and basil. People pass you in cloaks and weird hats, talking in a mashup of Latin, Tuscan, and good old-fashioned drama. Florence, at this point, is less a city and more a volatile powder keg of ambition, art, and banknotes. Here's the situation. Europe's just starting to shake off a couple centuries of plague, feudal nonsense, and theological micromanagement. Nobody's calling it the Middle Ages yet, but trust me, they're ready to be done with them. The Black Death hit like a cosmic reset button, wiping out a third of the population. And now that people are rebuilding, they're realizing, hey, maybe we could actually enjoy life a little. Enter the Renaissance. And where does it all start? Right under your sandals. Florence isn't the biggest city around, but it's rich. And not just in the smug, old money way. It's rich in ideas. And the people here have figured out something spicy. If you bankroll creativity, you control the future. Especially if you're the Medici family. Now, you might be thinking, who are the Medicis? Oh, just your average wool merchant turned papal banker, mega rich cultural overlords. Cosimo de' Medici is walking around right now, quietly funding poets, scientists, architects, and anyone with a brush and an ego. You spot him at a distance. He's not flashy. That's the thing with Cosimo. He knows real power doesn't need gold chains. It hides behind dusty library walls and pays for artists to paint ceilings with illusions so convincing they make people dizzy. Meanwhile, artists like Donatello are chiseling naked bronze guys out of metal, and nobody quite knows whether to admire them or cover them up. Brunelleschi is busy arguing with everyone about how to build a dome without scaffolding. People think he's lost it. You catch a glimpse of his wild eyes as he yells about herringbone brick patterns and physics no one else understands yet. And let's talk about that dome, Santa Maria del Fiore. It's enormous, a beast. You crane your neck trying to see the top and nearly fall into a vegetable cart. The guy building it? Not exactly a team player, but he's brilliant. Brunelleschi's dome becomes the first self-supporting dome since antiquity. Historians still debate whether he was a misunderstood genius or just very lucky with math. Art is exploding out of church walls and fountain corners. Perspective is suddenly a thing. You walk into a chapel and everything looks like it stretches back forever, thanks to a mathematical trick that turns flat walls into portals. Before now, nobody really bothered making things look real. Now everyone's obsessed with light, anatomy, and human emotion. And here's a detail you'll love. One of the more popular pigments, ultramarine blue, is made by grinding up lapis lazuli, which is imported from Afghanistan and costs more than gold. So when you see the Virgin Mary draped in blue, that's not a fashion statement. That's a financial flex. The Renaissance isn't just about pretty pictures. It's a vibe. It's about digging up old scrolls, copying Plato by candlelight, and wondering whether human beings might actually be interesting. That's a hot take in a world where people used to say you were born a sinner and should be grateful just to exist. You bump into a group of young men reading Cicero in the original Latin. They talk about virtù like it's a protein shake. To them, it means strength, excellence, and living life with style and honor. You nod like you understand, but mostly, you're wondering how their robes are still so clean. By now, you've figured out that the Renaissance doesn't have a master plan. It's messy. Half of Florence is still deeply religious. The other half is basically forming a book club with Aristotle. There's tension in the air, between sacred and secular, between control and curiosity. That tension, that's the spark. At night, lanterns swing gently over the Arno River. The bridges are lit, the wine is flowing, and there's music in the air. Somewhere, a choir rehearses in a side chapel. Their harmonies float through the city, high and eerie, like a ghost in Latin. The Renaissance starts here, not because it's destined to, but because Florence is rich, nervous, curious, and just arrogant enough to think it can reinvent the world. And hey, turns out they were kind of right. As you walk back to your lodgings, the city still buzzes. The dome is nearly done. The studios are lit. The books are piling up. And you're just getting started. You wake to the sound of hammering and shouting. Never a peaceful morning in Florence. The year is sliding toward the late 1400s, and everything around you smells like paint, sweat, and ambition. There's a strange energy in the air, like thunderclouds gathering behind marble statues. The Renaissance is hitting full stride now. Botticelli just painted a goddess emerging from a seashell, naked and perfect, on a canvas the size of your kitchen wall. And it's not just tolerated, it's adored. But things are about to get weird. You find yourself wandering into Botticelli's studio. It's cluttered with pigment powders, half-finished canvases, and a model trying very hard not to sneeze while holding a pose. Sandro Botticelli himself is pacing, mumbling about beauty, sin, and whether hands should have 5 fingers or a divine number like 8. He's a nervous genius, and something about his eyes says he hasn't slept in a while. His latest painting, The Birth of Venus, hangs beside you, still drying. It's all flowing hair, gentle curves, and mythical serenity. It's also wildly controversial. You can almost hear the whispers outside. Isn't that pagan? Isn't that a little much? But Florence isn't just full of painters. It's full of contradictions. On one hand, the Medici family is still writing checks for art, like it's going out of style. Lorenzo de' Medici, Lorenzo the Magnificent, is throwing parties that involve poetry duels and lions in cages. He's a patron, a poet, and occasionally a politician. Everyone loves him or fears him, often both. But on the other hand, there's Girolamo Savonarola. You see him in the square, thundering from a makeshift pulpit. His voice cuts through the morning haze like a knife. He's not impressed by Botticelli's goddesses or Brunelleschi's dome. He thinks Florence is drowning in vanity, pride, and sin. And people are listening. Savonarola is a Dominican friar with fire in his eyes, an apocalypse on his lips. He calls for repentance, reform, and the end of luxury. At first, you think he's just another street preacher. But then, the city starts changing. Books get burned. Mirrors, makeup, musical instruments, all thrown into the fire in what becomes known as the bonfire of the vanities. You watch from the shadows as once proud nobles drag their velvet cloaks into the flames. Artists hide their paintings. Even Botticelli, it's rumored, tosses a few of his works onto the pile. The very man who gave the world Venus now sides with the man who wants to bury her. The tension in Florence tightens like a bowstring. Some days feel like a festival of genius. Others like a funeral for joy. The Medici are exiled. Savonarola becomes the de facto ruler. No more balls, no more banquets, no more Botticelli. Or at least, not the old Botticelli. His later works shift. The soft faces turn sharp. The flowers wilt. His art becomes a sermon, but nothing lasts forever. By 1498, the tide turns again. The people who once cheered Savonarola now fear him. His apocalyptic rants feel too real, too relentless. And the Pope? He's not exactly a fan. Savonarola is arrested, tortured, and publicly executed in the very square where he once preached. You're there, somewhere in the crowd, unable to look away. The fire that once devoured vanities now devours the preacher himself. Florence, singed and stunned, limps forward. Botticelli will never quite recover. He keeps painting, but his mood darkens. The Renaissance continues, but it's been cracked. The golden glow of idealism now flickers with shadows. And you carry that smell of burning books with you as you head toward the next chapter. This is no longer just a story of rebirth. It's a story of struggle between beauty and belief, passion and purity, creation and control. Welcome to the Renaissance. You wake up in a dusty workshop that smells like burnt wax, horse glue, and a little bit of genius. There's parchment on every surface, under cups, pinned to walls, folded into shoes. Every square inch of this space is covered with sketches. Helicopters shaped like pine cones, flapping mechanical birds, gears inside gears, and, of course, an oddly muscular old man, dissected 6 ways from Sunday. Welcome to Leonardo da Vinci's brain. And good luck finding the exit. It's the turn of the 16th century, and you're in Milan. Florence was wild, but Milan? It's colder, more formal, fancier armor. And Leonardo's here on a kind of freelance contract, equal parts painter, party planner, and weapons designer. He's wearing pink robes, a long beard, and a vague expression that says he's either solving math or hungry. He's working on the Last Supper, but you'll soon realize painting is just one of the 1,200 things rattling around his skull. The mural's taken forever because Leonardo won't stop experimenting. Instead of using traditional fresco, he's trying out oils on dry plaster. It'll last longer, he says. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. But for now, the painting stuns. Jesus calmly announces his betrayal, and 12 apostles explode with confusion, grief, and outrage. You can feel the air thicken with disbelief. It's not just a scene, it's a drama mid-action, the Renaissance version of a Netflix cliffhanger. Leonardo's not even close to finished. In his notebooks, written in mirrored code to keep nosy eyes away, he's sketching flying machines, water pumps, even something suspiciously like a scuba suit. He writes about the motion of waves, the anatomy of horses, and how you should never trust surface appearances. You begin to suspect that if you gave this man TikTok, he'd invent 6 apps by accident before even opening it. You tag along as he performs dissections in secret, unwrapping the mysteries of the human body like an anatomical Christmas gift. The church isn't thrilled, but Leonardo can't help it. He needs to know. Veins, tendons, eyelids, everything. Meanwhile, he's designing city plans, military bridges, and one truly cursed robot knight. He rarely finishes anything, but that doesn't stop him from starting everything. His journals bulge with lists. Draw Milan Cathedral. Call Luca Pacioli. Calculate sunbeam angles. Describe tongue of woodpecker. Yes, that's real. He's always drawing. But the real art is how his mind works. You start to feel like you're walking inside a thunderstorm that thinks in Latin and dreams in gears. But not everyone's clapping. Critics whisper that he's wasting time. Too many ideas, they mutter. No follow-through. One nobleman complains he commissioned a horse statue, not a man building a windmill powered by monkeys. That's not a real invention. Probably. Still, when the Last Supper is unveiled, people cry. Scribes run out of adjectives. And Leonardo? He just shrugs and starts fiddling with a mirror to see how light bounces off a spoon. Meanwhile, the Renaissance is marching on without him. Michelangelo is flexing his biceps at blocks of marble in Florence. Raphael is quietly winning beauty contests with his Madonnas. Even Machiavelli is scribbling furiously about power and deception. You get the sense that everyone's sprinting, and Leonardo is strolling. And yet, that stroll covers more ground than most people manage in 5 lifetimes. He moves from Milan to Florence, to Rome to France. He builds automatons, drafts city sewer systems, and paints a woman with a half smile that will outlive us all. You see it happen the moment he places the last stroke on the Mona Lisa. He leans back, stares at it, and maybe, just maybe, smiles back. Historians still debate whether he truly saw himself as a painter, or whether art was just one more way to measure the pulse of the universe. Some say he was lonely. Others call him a show-off with deadline issues. But stand in the breeze of his ideas long enough, and you stop asking those questions. Leonardo dies in France, in the arms of a king who considered him a friend. But that doesn't feel like the end. Not really, because his sticky notes, the millions of scribbled thoughts, the wild ideas, the backwards writing, live on. And they whisper. They whisper to engineers, to dreamers, to painters and pilots, and people who lie awake wondering how the world really works. So you take one last look around his workshop. It's still messy. The glue still stinks. But suddenly, it all feels intentional. Genius rarely cleans up after itself. It's a bad day to be a ceiling. Specifically, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which is currently being glared at by one extremely muscular, extremely cranky Florentine named Michelangelo Buonarroti. You're lying flat on a scaffold made of creaky wood, staring up alongside him. The air is thick with plaster dust and painters' curses in Tuscan dialect. It's 1508, and Pope Julius II has just given Michelangelo the world's weirdest assignment: paint the Bible on the ceiling. And not just any ceiling, the ceiling. You squint up and realize the surface area is over 5,000 square feet. That's like wallpapering a basketball court. But from underneath, while upside down, and with theology, Michelangelo tries to say no. I'm a sculptor, he insists, not a painter. He has exactly zero experience with fresco. But the Pope doesn't care. Julius is a warrior pope, a man who leads armies into battle and threatens artists with holy wrath. And you're here for the drama. Michelangelo caves. He sets to work with a team of assistants, but he ends up firing most of them because no one does it right. So he teaches himself, buys pigments, builds custom scaffolding, sleeps in his clothes, eats standing up, sometimes forgets to bathe. He draws the entire thing by candlelight, upside down, day after day, year after year. It is torture. Your neck cramps just watching him. Paint drips into his eyes. He writes miserable poems about how his spine is twisted like a Syrian bow. And every time he stands back to check his work, a whole new section has to be torn down and redone. Imagine erasing a mistake that's 15 feet above your head every single time. And then you realize something. He's not just painting people. He's painting emotion. Adam, freshly formed, reaches for the finger of God. Not fully alive yet, but just on the verge. Noah's family panics as floodwaters rise. Prophets scream into the void. Every inch of this thing pulses with intensity, color, movement. You know how people say, it's just a ceiling. They're wrong. This is a roof full of rage and redemption, of human bodies twisted in beauty and pain. It's Michelangelo's love letter to suffering and salvation in ultramarine and ochre, and it nearly kills him, but not before he throws in one last joke. There, among the prophets, he paints the face of a rival with donkey ears. Petty? Maybe. Eternal? Absolutely. When he finally unveils it in 1512, Rome gasps. Even the Pope tears up. Tourists still crane their necks centuries later. And Michelangelo? He shrugs and heads back to his marble blocks. "Told you I was a sculptor," he mutters. Speaking of marble, do you remember that giant, unwanted, 18-foot-tall block of stone sitting in a Florentine yard? Michelangelo carved it into David. Just David. No frills, no armor. Just a naked teenager with a slingshot and the body of an Olympic god. People lose their minds. They parade the statue through the streets like it's a rock star. It becomes the symbol of defiant Florence. Small, scrappy, full of attitude. The Medici family, newly returned from exile, tries to claim it. Michelangelo politely tells them to pound sand. Still, they eventually lure him to Rome. Another pope, another project. This time, it's a tomb. A gigantic tomb. And halfway through, that job morphs into painting another chapel wall. The Last Judgment. If the Sistine ceiling was glorious, this is terrifying. Angels and devils. The saved rising with joy. The damned yanked downward by demons. And at the very center, a muscle-bound Jesus flinging judgment like a divine frisbee. It's beautiful. It's bleak. It's not subtle. People complain. Too many naked bodies, they whisper. Too intense. Michelangelo doesn't care. He paints his critics into hell. Historians still debate whether Michelangelo truly embraced the church's vision, or whether he used it as a canvas for his own existential dread. Was he a devout genius? A tortured loner? A passive-aggressive prophet with a paintbrush? Either way, he never stops. Even in his 70s, he's carving the Pietà Rondanini, a skeletal, heartbreaking sculpture of Mary holding Jesus. This one isn't polished, it's raw. You can still see the chisel marks, like he wanted you to know. This is how art bleeds. You leave Michelangelo with dust on his sleeves, muttering to himself about proportions and death. He'll pass away in 1564. At nearly 89 years old. But even now, the world he shaped, with marble and sweat and divine frustration, still arches over your head. Next time, someone tells you to just do your job, remember, Michelangelo turned a ceiling into the sky. The smell of ink is thick in your nose. Sharp, acidic, a little metallic. You've been flipping pamphlets for hours, and the tips of your fingers are black with type. It's the early 1500s, and you, like half of Europe, are absolutely hooked on print. That's right. This is the golden age of gossip, outrage, and open letters. Thanks to Gutenberg's press, invented back in the mid-1400s, information isn't just trickling anymore. It's flooding. You used to wait weeks for a letter from a monk. Now, you can buy 10 copies of a religious rant before breakfast. And yes, Everyone has something to say. Tonight, you're ducking through the alleys of Wittenberg, Saxony, just as a man in monk robes slams a nail into a church door. Boom, boom, boom. His name? Martin Luther. His issue? Indulgences. His mood? Livid. You've heard of indulgences, right? Pay the church some coin. Get time off from purgatory. Spiritual Black Friday. But Luther's had enough. He pens 95 theses. Essentially, a holy "we need to talk," and sends it out into the world. And that's where printing comes in. Someone grabs the Latin document, translates it into German, and prints thousands of copies. Suddenly, Luther isn't just an angry monk. He's a best-selling author. Pamphlets fly from presses like autumn leaves in a thunderstorm. The Pope is corrupt, one shouts. You can read the Bible in your own language, cries another. People are passing them under tables, copying them in margins, hiding them in socks. The church, naturally, flips. They call Luther to recant. He doesn't. They excommunicate him. He shrugs. They summon him to the diet of worms. Yes, it's really called that. Where he famously says, "Here I stand. I can do no other." He's basically saying, "This is my hill, and I will die on it." You're not alone in noticing that Luther isn't just challenging indulgences anymore. He's questioning the entire structure of church authority. And suddenly, bam, the Protestant Reformation is on. But here's the plot twist. This isn't just about religion. It's about information and panic and people realizing they can publish their own thoughts, whether or not those thoughts are approved. Luther may be the spark, but the explosion is social, cultural, and absolutely viral. Let's talk about what these pamphlets actually look like. They're cheap. Single pages or small booklets, often illustrated with woodcuts. Imagine memes, but with demons and popes. One shows the Pope with a devil tail. Another shows Christ entering on a donkey, while the Pope rides a war horse in bling. Subtle. Not really, but oh, so effective. Some pamphlets are serious theological arguments. Others are just insults dressed in scripture. It's like watching a flame war, but on linen paper. And it spreads fast. By the 1520s, people are printing in cities like Basel, Nuremberg, Zurich, and London. You can't stop it. You can only hope to skim it before bedtime. And it's not just Protestants joining the print party. Catholics hit back, printing counter pamphlets. Scholars write rebuttals. Everyone's in on it. It's like the Renaissance invented the comments section. Remember Erasmus, the Dutch scholar with a razor wit and a love of Latin puns. He was a printing superstar. His praise of folly poked fun at everyone, especially the church, but without actually breaking away. He and Luther were frenemies. Both loved the Bible, both loved Greek, and both wrote so much shade. Historians still debate whether Erasmus secretly liked the Reformation or just hated awkward public conflict. Either way, he helped fuel the fire by proving that humor and theology were not mutually exclusive. Now let's zoom out for a second. What's really happening here is that Europe is going through an identity crisis. Before, the church controlled most of the narrative. But now, with the press, the people do. Suddenly, interpretation is power. Translation is rebellion. And if you're thinking, this sounds like the internet, you're not wrong. Printers are basically the influencers of their day. Authors build followings. Cities become content hubs. People align themselves not by kingdom, but by ideas. You start hearing things like Lutheran and Calvinist instead of just Christian. But with all this freedom comes risk. You stumble into a backroom press in Strasbourg. The printer looks nervous. He's making radical pamphlets that call out not just Rome, but local rulers too. People are starting to wonder, if we can question the Pope, why not the Prince? That thought terrifies the elites. Censorship rises. Bans are issued. People are burned. But like any good revolution, the words are already loose. You can hide a pamphlet under a cloak, bake it into a loaf of bread, smuggle it across borders with a wink. One printer gets caught with a whole stack of anti-authority leaflets. You expect panic, but he just shrugs, lights a pipe, and says, "I'll print more tomorrow." By the mid-16th century, printing has changed everything. Not just religion, but education, politics, art. Scientists print experiments. Explorers print maps. The literate class swells. Books go from luxury items to household staples. And just for fun, a few copies of racy poetry sneak into the stacks too. Because humans, the real twist, the same press that spreads Luther's message will, decades later, spread books against the Reformation. It's not inherently radical. It just does what you tell it. A mechanical neutral zone. The chaos is entirely human. You step outside into the twilight, arms full of pamphlets. Some are angry, some are hopeful. All are inked in urgency. And even now, centuries later, you can still hear the rustle of paper, the clack of the press, the whispered words passed hand to hand, generation to generation. Printing didn't just panic Europe, it rewrote it. You wake to the smell of smoke. Not fire, not danger, but ink and parchment curling on a black iron skillet. Someone's burning documents again. It's the 1520s, and the whole continent is obsessed with setting ideas on fire, literally and figuratively. Because tonight, your story shifts from books to brawls, from ink to outrage, from printing to protest. Hi, meet Martin Luther again. But now, he's bigger than the books he started with. He's a walking revolution. His face is carved into woodcuts. His sermons echo from makeshift pulpits. His theology is being adopted by nobles, peasants, teachers, and tavern drunks alike. And somewhere in this chaotic noise, you hear a simple question echoing across Europe. What if the church isn't the boss anymore? That question doesn't just shake faith. It splits countries, splits families, splits kingdoms. And while Luther never planned to rip apart Europe, that's exactly what's happening. Welcome to the Reformation's next level. Tonight's special, the holy mess of kings, crusades, and cancellations. We're starting with indulgences and ending with something even more dangerous: organized protest. And first up is a German noble's dream gone wrong. The Peasants' War, 1524-1525. Imagine this. You're a farmer. You've read one of Luther's fiery pamphlets, probably smuggled under a bag of onions at the local market. It says, all people are equal before God. That's powerful stuff, especially if you've spent your whole life under the boot of lords, bishops, and tax collectors. You want change. You want justice. You want to stop being whipped for picking wild herbs in the forest. So you join a movement. And suddenly, there are tens of thousands of you. Peasants with pikes, farmers with pitchforks, marching under banners that scream biblical slogans like, God is on our side. Luther's reaction? Whoa, slow down. See, Martin was never trying to dismantle society, just realign it spiritually. He wants God's truth, not a peasant uprising. So when the revolt turns violent, he does the unthinkable. He sides with the nobles. And in one scalding pamphlet, against the murderous, thieving hordes of peasants, he basically says, kill them all. The uprising is crushed. Blood drenches the fields of Germany. The Reformation survives. But the peasants don't forget. Historians still debate whether Luther betrayed his ideals or just tried to contain the chaos he unleashed. But that's just one corner of the firestorm. Now pivot your view across the channel into England. Because while Germany is burning, King Henry VIII is pouting hard. He's got a problem. Several, actually. Chief among them, he wants a divorce. Catherine of Aragon, his wife of nearly 2 decades, hasn't given him a son. He thinks Anne Boleyn, young, witty, fashionable, might do the trick. So he asks the Pope for an annulment. The Pope, trapped in political alliances, nervous about Catherine's powerful relatives, says no. Big mistake. Henry snaps. You're in London when it happens. The gossip travels faster than the Thames itself. One day, the king's Catholic. The next day, he's creating his own church, the Church of England, appointing himself supreme head, canceling the Pope, keeping the robes. This isn't just religious rebellion. It's dynastic drama. You're seeing the royal marriage as political weapon, theological chessboard, and dangerous soap opera. Over the next decade, Henry cycles through 6 wives, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Classic. You hear prayers rewritten in English, monasteries torn down, treasures seized, icons burned, chanting silenced. And through it all, Henry insists, this is totally normal, totally holy, totally legal. England, like a confused teenager, swings between old school Catholic rituals and Protestant reform. People are executed for having the wrong version of the Bible, for reading the Bible, for not reading it enough. You see friends turn on each other, neighbors whisper, Priests hide forbidden books behind altar stones. And in the middle of it all, little Elizabeth grows up watching her father chop heads and rewrite doctrines. Spoiler alert, she's taking notes. Let's rewind to the continent for a moment. Because while England's royal mess plays out, France, Switzerland, and the Holy Roman Empire are wrestling their own Reformation demons. Enter John Calvin, tall, intense, French, the guy who read the entire Bible and thought, this needs more footnotes. Calvin brings structure to what Luther started. His concept? Predestination. That God already knows who's saved and who's doomed. Comforting. Not really. Calvinists live tight, disciplined lives. No dancing, no gambling, and definitely no flirting. But hey, their printing presses are efficient, and their sermons are tight. Geneva becomes a Reformation model city. Squeaky clean, deeply devout, slightly terrifying. Now skip back to the Holy Roman Empire. Emperor Charles V is juggling heretics, wars, and family drama. He hosts diet after diet. No, still not food. Trying to keep his realm from splintering completely. In 1555, he gives up. The Peace of Augsburg is signed, letting princes choose the religion of their territories, Catholic or Lutheran. Your fate. It now depends on your ruler's reading habits. It's a compromise, sure, but it also bakes division into law. And let's not forget the Catholics. They're not folding, they're reforming from the inside out. Cue the Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563. It's like a decades-long meeting with no coffee breaks. But it works. The Catholic Church reaffirms its doctrines, improves education for priests, and launches the Counter-Reformation. Out go lazy bishops. In come the Jesuits. Those brainy, disciplined, globe-trotting missionaries who preach, teach, and occasionally terrify. And then, the Inquisition gets turbocharged. Because when you give humans both theology and torture devices, things get dark fast. You pass through Spain, where books are blacklisted, whispers are dangerous, and the wrong opinion might land you in a windowless cell. You hear the phrase, auto da fe, a ritual of public penance that ends in fire. Historians still debate whether the Inquisition preserved orthodoxy or just terrorized innovation. Either way, the world you live in now is no longer united. It's splintered along lines of faith, politics, economics, and identity. The age of indulgence is over. Now it's the age of conviction, where popes issue bulls, kings issue decrees, pamphleteers issue insults, and the people, you, are caught in the whirlwind. There's no going back to one church, no single truth, only the frantic press of arguments, alliances, and desperate prayers under flickering candlelight. And if you listen closely, beneath the sermons and sword fights, you can still hear the echo of a nail slamming into wood, not to hang a door, but to split a world. You can smell the candle wax burning on a cold English night. Somewhere in the palace, someone's whispering, bad news. Not the kind that gets shouted in public, but the kind that travels like mold behind stone walls. The kind that keeps queens up at night. Because tonight, you're sitting at the dinner table with Henry VIII, and yes, he's eating like a king. Roast swan, honeyed pears, a gallon of wine. But behind the gold goblet and turkey leg, Henry is seething. His headache, wives, wars, and the small matter of not having a son. Let's set the scene. You're in the 1530s. England's still adjusting to its religious makeover. Priests now report to the king. Latin's out, English is in. Monasteries, those age-old centers of charity, education, and land hoarding, are being looted and smashed. Henry calls it reform. You call it the biggest real estate grab in British history. But behind the politics, it's all about family. You've seen him with Catherine of Aragon, his first queen, dutiful, devout. But after 6 children and only one surviving girl, Mary, Henry's patience wore thinner than his hairline. So enters Anne Boleyn. Anne isn't just a lady in waiting. She's lightning in a dress, clever, Protestant-leaning, and, most crucially, not Catherine. Henry breaks with Rome just to marry her, making her Queen of England and mother of future greatness. Only the greatness never arrives. Anne gives birth to a girl, Elizabeth. Henry is disappointed. Then Anne miscarries. Then she allegedly flirts with courtiers. Then she allegedly flirts with her own brother. And just like that, you're witnessing a trial, a mockery of one. Anne's convicted of adultery and incest. Her execution is swift, swan-like neck on the chopping block. It's May 1536. Her daughter, Elizabeth, is 3. She watches her mother disappear and learns something very important about royal love. It's conditional. Henry marries again, of course. Jane Seymour, sweet, quiet, unproblematic. She finally gives him the son he craved, Edward, and then dies 2 weeks later from childbirth complications. You get the sense Henry's personal life is a bit cursed. Or maybe it's just karma. But even with Edward, Henry's headaches are only beginning. See, Europe's watching and judging. The Pope has excommunicated him. Spain's furious. France is unpredictable. Scotland's bristling. And Ireland? Always a problem. So Henry builds ships, fortifies coasts, invents new taxes, executes anyone who hesitates, including Thomas More, his once best friend, turned Catholic martyr. And just when it seems like he might mellow with age, nope, he keeps marrying Anne of Cleves, a political match. Henry sees her portrait, says, sure, then meets her in person and says, absolutely not. Divorce in 6 months. Catherine Howard, young, lively, possibly too lively. She's executed for infidelity. Catherine Parr, smart, survives. probably slept with one eye open for years. By the time Henry dies in 1547, he's obese, ulcer-ridden, paranoid, and the father of a very unstable legacy. Which brings you into the real storm. His children. First comes Edward VI, just a boy, but deeply Protestant. Surrounded by regents, the young king pushes England further from Rome. More reforms, more book burnings, more confusion. Then Edward dies at 15. Enter Mary, Henry's eldest daughter, with Catherine of Aragon, a hardcore Catholic. She wants to undo the damage, bring back the Pope, and restore true faith. Her method? Burn Protestants alive, hundreds of them. She earns the nickname Bloody Mary. And no, it's not about the cocktail. You're living in whiplash. The nation flips religious identity every decade. Imagine the stress of redecorating your chapel. Icons up, icons down. Latin in, English out. Heresy changes with the monarch's mood. And then Mary dies. No heir. Elizabeth rises. You remember her. Anne Boleyn's daughter. Survivor of palace drama. Student of political terror. She's smart. Sharp as a dagger in a velvet sleeve. And she walks a tightrope like no one before her. Elizabeth knows England can't survive another religious whiplash. So she chooses compromise. She keeps Protestant doctrine, but allows some Catholic aesthetics. She crafts the Elizabethan settlement, a masterclass in ambiguity. You can believe in real presence or symbolic bread, as long as you kneel quietly. And while theologians argue, Elizabeth gets to work. She solidifies England's navy, encourages exploration, flirts with foreign kings, but never marries, declares herself married to England. And then comes him, Philip II of Spain. He's Mary's widower, devout, powerful, furious. He wants England back in the Catholic fold, and maybe wants Elizabeth's throne as a bonus. So he builds the Spanish Armada, 130 warships, cannons, soldiers, priests for forced conversions. But this is England, where the weather is rude and the sea is moody. In 1588, the Armada sails. Elizabeth dons armor, gives a rousing speech at Tilbury. I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman. And her navy, smaller, faster, chases the Armada into ruin. Storms finish what cannonballs start. Spain's grand plan dissolves into sea foam. England erupts in pride. Elizabeth becomes a myth. And you're starting to believe in this Protestant experiment. But hold on, don't get comfy. Across Europe, wars of religion are still raging. France sees the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, 1572. Thousands of Huguenots slaughtered by Catholic mobs in a single week. The Holy Roman Empire is slipping into chaos. Calvinists and Catholics glare at each other over beer steins. and gunpowder stockpiles. And meanwhile, something's brewing in the Netherlands. Dutch rebels, sick of Spanish rule and Catholic authority, rise up in the 80 Years' War. They want independence. They want religious freedom. They want less Spain. You walk through Amsterdam as it transforms into a haven of trade, tolerance, tulips, and, eventually, capitalism. Historians still debate whether this Dutch rebellion was mostly about faith or taxes. You decide it's both. And while all this unfolds, an idea is forming in Europe's smoky corners. What if war doesn't solve this? What if reason does? But that's for another night. For now, close your eyes and picture Elizabeth's silhouette. Hair, flame red, eyes, cold steel, watching the sea swallow the Spanish Armada. A queen made by chaos. A kingdom held together by sheer performance. And your candle's almost out. The sky above you is wide, black, and full of questions. There's no city glare, no light pollution, just stars, sharp, cold, and blinking like they know something you don't. You lie back on the damp roof tiles, squinting upward in the Italian countryside, somewhere outside Padua. It's 1609, and Galileo Galilei has just pointed his telescope toward Jupiter. And tonight, you get to look through it too. You blink. There they are, 4 tiny dots beside the planet, little moons, orbiting something that isn't Earth. Your stomach flips, because up until now, everything was supposed to orbit you. Earth was the center. You were the center. It was comforting, wasn't it? Well, not anymore. Galileo doesn't sleep much after that. He writes, publishes, draws what he sees. The telescope becomes more than a gadget. It's a scalpel, slicing clean through centuries of belief. But back up a second. How did you get here? Let's rewind to 1543. You're at the deathbed of Nicholas Copernicus, a cautious Polish cleric with a thing for math. His book on the revolutions of the celestial spheres is just out, quietly claiming that the Earth orbits the Sun. He's buried before anyone can burn him for it. Because this heliocentric idea, it's heresy. It contradicts the Bible's apparent wording. It undercuts Aristotle. It calls into question the entire theological GPS. Yet, it explains the planets better. Fewer wonky loops, smoother math. Still, people scoff. Until, decades later, you meet Johannes Kepler, a German with weird eyes and even weirder ideas. He's convinced God used geometry to design the heavens, and after years of obsessive number crunching, he realizes planets move in ellipses, not perfect circles. That one insight. Planets don't orbit in divine circles. Shocks everyone, even Kepler. But he publishes it anyway. No one reads it. Not yet. Meanwhile, back in Italy, Galileo starts making noise. He's charming, sarcastic, occasionally rude. Basically, a 17th century science YouTuber. He refines the telescope, sees craters on the moon, so not a perfect sphere, spots, sunspots, so the sun's flawed too. Then he publishes The Starry Messenger and flips Europe's view of the cosmos like a mattress. And people notice. The Catholic Church, for starters. See, Galileo's problem isn't the telescope, it's his mouth. He doesn't just describe what he sees, he mocks those who won't believe it. He gives characters in his books, names like Simplicio, and lets them spout Aristotelian nonsense. You can imagine how that goes over in Rome. Eventually, the church calls him in, gives him a quiet warning, but Galileo doubles down, writes a book endorsing heliocentrism. So in 1633, he stands trial, old, stooped, almost blind. The verdict? Guilty of heresy, forced to recant. But legend says, as he turns to leave, he mutters, "Eppur si muove." And yet, it moves. You're pretty sure he whispered it for your benefit. Now zoom out. Look beyond the stars. What you're seeing is the scientific revolution cracking open. You're watching natural philosophy, once the realm of monks and mystics, turn into modern science. Francis Bacon, in damp old England, preaches the power of observation and inductive reasoning. He tells you, forget Aristotle. Go outside, measure things, trust your senses. Across the channel, René Descartes sits in a cold room, doubting everything until he lands on cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. He imagines the world as a machine, knowable through math and logic. Historians still debate whether Descartes launched modern philosophy or just ruined it for everyone else. You sit with Isaac Newton under a tree. Yes, that tree. As an apple drops beside you, he barely blinks, just mutters about gravity and starts scribbling equations. By the time he's finished, he's explained the movement of planets, the tides, even the rainbow. Principia Mathematica lands like a bomb in 1687. And when he says, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants," you nudge him and whisper, "You're one of them now." But science doesn't live in a vacuum. Over in Rome, Giordano Bruno, a mystic and early cosmologist, gets burned at the stake in 1600. Not just for science, but for claiming an infinite universe with infinite worlds. The church doesn't like infinite. Infinity smells like chaos. And yet, the chaos is beautiful. It drives the artists too. You walk through Caravaggio's Rome. Dark paintings lit like crime scenes. You hum alongside Bach's perfect harmonies in Protestant Germany. You hear the ticking of clocks replacing the slow toll of church bells. Time itself is changing. You're entering a world of reason. But hold up, don't confuse this with peace. Because just as Galileo is staring into the stars, Europe is tearing itself apart over religious identity. Again, the 30 Years' War, 1618-1648, makes everything before look like a bar fight. Catholics and Protestants, kings and peasants, Swedes and Habsburgs, all stabbing each other over theology, territory, and ego. By the end, a third of the German population is dead. A treaty finally ends it. The Peace of Westphalia. A word that will forever give high school students headaches. It introduces a radical idea. Sovereign states can choose their religion. You sigh with relief until you realize it's also the moment the nation-state starts becoming a thing. Boundaries harden. Monarchs centralize. Bureaucracy spreads like mold. You're no longer just a subject. You're a citizen. Maybe. But in the quiet aftermath, another revolution begins. One of books. Because printing presses are everywhere now. And they're humming with bold ideas. You open a fresh copy of The Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. He's bleak, sees humans as violent little gremlins who need a strong ruler to keep them from eating each other. Life, he writes, is nasty, brutish, and short. Then you flip to John Locke. He's sunnier. Talks about natural rights, life, liberty, property. Suggests that governments exist by the consent of the governed. You underline that bit. It feels important. These aren't just thoughts. They're seeds. You close your eyes again and look back at the stars. Once, they told you your fate. Now, they tell you the universe is vast, mechanical, discoverable. Once, you believed everything revolved around you. Now, you're learning how to revolve around truth. You wake up sweating in a drafty salon in Paris, chin resting on a velvet armrest, surrounded by powdered wigs, flickering candelabras, and enough perfume to knock out a horse. It's the mid-1700s, and reason is officially sexy. Welcome to the Enlightenment, where ideas flow like wine, people argue for sport, and the line between philosopher and rock star gets blurry. You look to your left. Voltaire is mid-rant, waving a quill at no one in particular. On your right, Rousseau is sulking. Again. Across the room, a young woman in a satin gown quotes Locke and casually dismantles the monarchy over tea. This is more than a trend. It's a movement, and it's spreading faster than smallpox. Here, in candlelit drawing rooms and smoky coffee houses, thinkers are daring to ask, what if humans are inherently rational? What if government should serve the people? What if ignorance isn't a virtue? Your brain itches just thinking about it. Let's break this down. In Paris, you eavesdrop on Voltaire, whose real name is something nobody bothers to remember. He's sharp-tongued, hilarious, and allergic to tyranny. He's been exiled from France more times than you've left your hometown, but he keeps coming back. Voltaire worships reason, mocks organized religion, especially if it's smug, and dreams of a world ruled by enlightened monarchs. He writes plays, pamphlets, and letters faster than anyone can burn them. One of his favorite quotes, "Écraser l'infâme," crush the infamous thing. The infamous thing. is superstition, by the way. And maybe the church. Definitely the church. Then there's Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who feels everything way too deeply. He believes people are born good, but civilization messes them up. His book, The Social Contract, starts with a gut punch. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. He argues for popular sovereignty, that political authority belongs to the people, not some fancy dude with a crown and questionable lineage. His ideas resonate with anyone who's ever muttered, "This system is rigged." Meanwhile, over in Scotland, David Hume is being delightfully skeptical. He questions everything, even whether cause and effect are real or just something your brain makes up so you don't scream into the void. Historians still debate whether Hume was a genius or just really good at giving philosophy students existential crises. Also in Scotland, Adam Smith writes The Wealth of Nations, laying the foundation for modern economics. He explains that the economy functions best when individuals pursue their self-interest. It's not greed, it's the invisible hand, which is just the classiest way of saying everyone's winging it. In Germany, Immanuel Kant is pacing like a metronome. He never leaves his routine, yet somehow writes Critique of Pure Reason, a book so dense, even the trees that died to make the paper are mad about it. Kant insists that enlightenment is humanity's emergence from self-imposed ignorance. Dare to know, he says. Think for yourself. The world nods politely, and then rereads the first sentence 5 times. But the Enlightenment isn't just white guys with wigs and opinions. Enter Mary Wollstonecraft in England. She sees the contradictions immediately. Liberty and reason for men. But women are supposed to smile and nod? Nope. She writes, a vindication of the rights of woman, demanding education, equality, and logic applied consistently. It's revolutionary and decades ahead of its time. She's often ignored, dismissed, or called hysterical, which means she's probably onto something. In salons, these thinkers talk and talk and talk. But also, they publish. Books are now cheaper. Printing presses clatter like dinnerware in an earthquake. Literacy rates are climbing. You hear whispers in French alleyways and German taverns. Freedom, rights, reform. And then comes the encyclopedia. Diderot's Encyclopédie is more than a book. It's a weapon disguised as reference material, a 1,000-page act of rebellion. It catalogs knowledge, yes, but also includes subversive essays challenging religion, monarchy, and tradition. It's banned, obviously. So naturally, everyone reads it. Out in the countryside, things aren't so glamorous. Enlightenment ideas travel slowly through mud and taxes, but even peasants hear echoes. A vague sense that something is changing, that maybe kings aren't chosen by God, that maybe the world isn't just a ladder with them stuck on the bottom rung. Meanwhile, monarchs start branding themselves enlightened despots. You squint, Frederick the Great of Prussia writes letters with Voltaire. He reforms legal codes and tolerates religions. unless you're Polish. Catherine the Great of Russia reads Enlightenment philosophy in her bathrobe, funds the arts, and occasionally crushes revolts with impressive violence. Let's be honest, these rulers love Enlightenment ideas, as long as they don't challenge their thrones. But that challenge is coming. You're in a dusty colonial office in Boston now, and a storm is brewing. American pamphlets quote Locke like scripture. The idea that governments exist by consent, not divine decree, is gaining traction, and the Enlightenment is its fuel. You meet Benjamin Franklin in a French salon. He's charming, witty, and somehow both drunk and dignified. He flirts and argues with equal passion, dazzling everyone with his stories of lightning and liberty. He's not alone. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and the rest of the powdered crew are Enlightenment fanboys, quoting Rousseau while simultaneously owning slaves. Irony check. Failed. Still, the Enlightenment sets the intellectual groundwork for revolution, not just in America, but soon in France. You hear rumblings, not just philosophical debates, but real anger, real hunger. In Paris, the salons feel more electric than ever. It's no longer just thinkers sipping wine. Now it's workers, bakers, soldiers, and tailors whispering about liberty, equality, fraternity. Because here's the thing, once people believe they deserve rights, they start asking why they don't have them. Ideas become matches, and the Enlightenment has soaked the world in gasoline. So you take a deep breath. You've met the philosophers. You've read the books. You've laughed at Voltaire's roast sessions, cried at Rousseau's optimism, nodded along with Wollstonecraft's fury. You've stood in candlelight and imagined better worlds. Now it's time to see what happens when people try to build them. The powdered wigs are off. The gloves too. You're not in a salon anymore. You're on the cobbled streets of Paris, and the smell of baking bread has been replaced by sweat, fear, and powder. Gunpowder, not face powder. Welcome to the French Revolution. You hear drums in the distance, muffled shouting, church bells ringing not for mass, but for mobilization. The air is electric with anticipation and something darker. It's July 14, 1789. You glance up at a gray fortress, the Bastille, and before you can say constitutional monarchy, it's under siege. Hi everyone. Tonight, we're storming the Bastille with a bread knife and a pamphlet. It's all gone downhill from a cake-related misquote. France, by this point, is broke. Not, we're gonna tighten the budget, broke. More like, let's auction the furniture in Versailles, broke. Centuries of bad management, aristocratic excess, and wars, including helping the Americans stick it to the British, have drained the treasury, and now the people are starving. You watch as nobles dance under crystal chandeliers, while peasants chew on tree bark. Seriously, bark. Louis XVI is king, a gentle but indecisive guy who'd rather fix locks than deal with politics. His queen, Marie Antoinette, is fabulous, oblivious, and definitely didn't say, let them eat cake. Historians still debate whether that line was slander or satire. But it's too late. She's the revolution's villain now. With the country imploding, Louis summons the Estates General, a medieval parliament made of 3 parts: the clergy, first estate; the nobles, second; and everyone else, third. Guess who makes up 98% of the country and gets the least say? The third estate walks out in protest and forms the National Assembly. They swear an oath on a tennis court because symbolism loves irony, not to disband until they have a constitution. This is your French Revolution pregame show. Fast forward. Riots break out. Bread prices hit absurd levels. The king sends troops to Paris for order, which everyone reads as for crackdown. So the people storm the Bastille, technically a prison, but mostly a symbol of tyranny. They find just 7 prisoners, but the real treasure is the gunpowder. And the message: the monarchy is not untouchable. Heads are paraded on pikes, literally. The revolutionaries start rewriting society. They abolish feudal privileges, declare equal rights for men, and adopt the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, co-authored by Lafayette. Yes, that Lafayette, and possibly Jefferson. But it's not all liberty and croissants. The revolution quickly splinters. Some want reform. Others want full-blown abolition. Enter the Jacobins, radical and uncompromising. Their star, Maximilien Robespierre. Robespierre is intense. You'd avoid eye contact with him at a party. He believes in virtue and will kill for it. Meanwhile, the king tries to flee. Bad idea. He's caught in Varennes, disguised in peasant clothes, so ridiculous they scream, "Noble in costume." He's dragged back, humiliated, and eventually executed by guillotine. Yes, that terrifying blade becomes a symbol of equality. Everyone loses their head the same way. Now, with the king dead and France declared a republic, Robespierre takes center stage. What follows is the reign of terror. It's not a metaphor. Robespierre launches a campaign to purge enemies of the revolution. Thousands are guillotined, including Marie Antoinette, Danton, his old ally, and random people who looked at bread the wrong way. You're at a trial that lasts 5 minutes. The accused doesn't even speak. The crowd cheers anyway. Historians still debate whether Robespierre lost control, or if this was the control. He believed terror was a necessary cleansing. Virtue without terror is powerless, he said. Not exactly a bedtime quote. Eventually, Robespierre himself is arrested and guillotined without trial. Irony, poetic justice, revolution devouring its children. You decide. France is now in chaos. Governments rise and fall like baguettes in an earthquake. Out of the mess crawls a short Corsican man with excellent posture. You meet Napoleon Bonaparte. He's brilliant, confident, and allergic to losing. First, he saves the revolution from royalists with a whiff of grape shot. Yes, he literally fires a cannon into a mob. Then he wins battle after battle in Italy and Egypt. He's so popular, people don't even blink when he returns to Paris and takes over in a coup. Within years, he crowns himself emperor, because nothing says republic values like placing a crown on your own head while the Pope watches awkwardly. But Napoleon isn't just a power-hungry general. He brings reforms, modern legal codes, the Napoleonic Code, public education, streamlined administration. He also brings war, lots of it. You're on horseback in Austerlitz, watching Napoleon outmaneuver Austrians and Russians. Then you're freezing with French troops in Russia as the 1812 campaign falls apart spectacularly. Burned cities, endless snow, dysentery. Napoleon's Grand Army melts faster than snowmen in April. He's defeated, exiled to Elba, escapes, returns for 100 days, and then loses again at Waterloo. He's finally exiled to St. Helena, a tiny island where he spends his last years complaining and dictating his memoirs. France, meanwhile, has tried monarchy again. Awkward. Revolution again. Messy. And finally, just starts rotating governments like their phone cases. But the spark the revolution lit, it spreads. You look around Europe, people are watching France and thinking, wait, we can do that? Ideas cross oceans. Haitian revolutionaries declare independence. Latin American colonies stir. The old world order is creaking. The Enlightenment gave people words. The French Revolution gave them action. And now, nothing is quite the same. The age of monarchs is wobbling. The age of people, messy, hopeful, flawed, and furious, is rising. So, you take a deep breath and glance at the guillotine, now rusting in a museum somewhere. The crowd has gone quiet. The salons are quieter still, but you know the whisper is coming again. The whisper of change. You're standing in a thunderstorm, except it's not made of rain. It's made of steam, smoke, and the unrelenting shriek of iron grinding against iron. This is not weather. This is the Industrial Revolution. You probably didn't bring a raincoat anyway. The streets smell like coal, sweat, and cheap gin. Children dart between rattling carts and clattering horses. Factory whistles scream before the sun even rises. And you're about to clock in for a 12-hour shift, where your job is to not die in the spinning jenny. Tonight, we're trading powdered wigs for boiler hats, and the Enlightenment for engines. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's enjoy our ride tonight. You're in Britain, the unlikely epicenter of the transformation that will rip the world from its agricultural cradle and toss it headfirst into the machine age. You're not sure what year it is, but everything is getting faster and louder. This revolution isn't sparked by an angry mob or a guillotine. It's sparked by cotton, coal, and curiosity. Historians still debate why Britain took the lead. Was it its natural resources? Its colonies feeding cheap raw materials? Its relatively stable government? Or did it just get lucky with an obsessive wave of tinkering minds? You start with textiles. Cotton comes in from India and the American South, and people want to spin it faster. Enter the spinning jenny, the water frame, and the power loom. Machines that once took a skilled weaver days to do now churn out yards of fabric in an hour. You wander into a mill. Inside, it's deafening. The air tastes like lint. There's a 6-year-old cleaning under moving gears with a brush. That kid has one job. Don't die. Most don't. Child labor isn't just a reality. It's a cornerstone of the factory system. But no one's calling HR. There is no HR. By the time James Watt improves the steam engine, it's game over for the old world. Now factories don't have to be next to rivers. They can be anywhere. Cities balloon overnight. Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds. These towns go from quiet markets to smoke-belching super hubs. You feel it. The air tightens. The pace of life accelerates. Time is money becomes more than a saying. It's a law. And oh, the trains. You hop onto a black iron beast called the Rocket, blasting across the countryside at 30 miles per hour. People scream. It's too fast, they say. Human bodies weren't meant for such speeds. You just hold onto your hat and wonder what they'll think when planes show up. But progress isn't a warm hug. It's a punch in the face. You duck into a slum, a row of hastily built housing for factory workers. It smells like mold, sewage, and hopelessness. One toilet serves 100 people. Typhus is more common than tea. And if your kid survives to age 5, they'll probably work in a mine. Welcome to the human cost of profit margins. Karl Marx, a bearded German in exile, is scribbling notes in the British Museum. He sees the smoke, the poverty, the endless grind of labor, and he's not having it. He co-writes the Communist Manifesto with Friedrich Engels, who's seen factory life up close. Together, they declare that capitalism is exploitation, and the workers of the world should unite and overthrow it all. You hear whispers of rebellion. Revolutions spark across 1848 Europe, fizzling in some places, roaring in others. The world is changing, but not quite fast enough. Meanwhile, back in the factories, some owners do try to improve things. Enter the social reformers, people like Robert Owen, who builds model worker villages with schools, clean housing, and fairer hours. But most industrialists don't follow suit. You step into a coal mine. It's pitch black, suffocating, and full of coughing. Men and children hammer at the rock for 12-hour shifts. Every so often, someone forgets to check the gas levels, and the mine explodes. Progress, they call it. Still, you can't argue with the results. Everything is faster, cheaper, bigger. There are now steamships crossing oceans, telegraphs sending messages instantly, and machines building machines. This century becomes addicted to innovation. Tinkerers become heroes. Isambard Kingdom Brunel, a man with a name as ridiculous as his bridges, builds massive iron ships and railway tunnels that blow minds. The Victorians worship engineering like it's magic. And you're just getting started, because industrialization doesn't stop in Britain. It spreads to Germany, France, and America, where men like Carnegie and Rockefeller take capitalism to terrifying new heights. Think monopoly, but with actual monopolies. The middle class rises. Suddenly, there's a population of people who aren't aristocrats or factory workers. They sip tea, read novels, and debate politics in drawing rooms. This group will become crucial in the political fights to come. And then, steam gives way to steel, electricity, and chemistry. The second industrial revolution explodes like a sequel with a bigger budget. You see light bulbs, telephones, assembly lines, and internal combustion engines. You hear names like Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, and Alexander Graham Bell, half inventors, half wizards. Edison electrocuted an elephant to prove his point, not his finest hour. Tesla wanted to give away free wireless electricity to the world and was quietly sabotaged for it. And through it all, society is mutating. Cities swell, empires boom, pollution blankets the sky, factories dominate skylines where cathedrals once ruled. You look up at the chimney stacks and realize God no longer sits at the top of the world. Now it's industry, still. For all the soot and suffering, there's a heartbeat of hope beneath it all. People believe in progress. They believe the world can be improved, not by divine will, but by human hands. It's messy, it's brutal, it's magnificent, and the engine's only warming up. The gears of industry never stop turning. But tonight, you step away from the machines and into something far stranger, an age of marvels, where reason squares off with revolution and powdered wigs get singed by the fire of radical ideas. You're holding a pamphlet. It crackles in your hand like it might catch fire at any second. It's titled Common Sense, and the guy who wrote it, Thomas Paine, is basically yelling through the pages. He's not being polite about monarchy, or God, or the British Empire. Tonight, ideas go to war. So before we light that intellectual fuse, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I'm doing here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time your brain explodes from enlightenment overload. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's enjoy our ride tonight. You're living through the long 18th century. But it doesn't feel long. It feels like one lightning bolt after another. One idea detonates, and the whole structure of society trembles. You start with the thinkers. Voltaire, that sharp-tongued Frenchman, loves freedom of speech So much he says he'll defend your right to shout nonsense at the top of your lungs, even if he thinks your nonsense is, well, stupid. Then there's Rousseau, who says maybe humans are born free and noble, and society is the one that messes them up. A spicy take in a world of kings, prisons, and corsets. And Montesquieu? He's obsessed with separating powers, so no one person can become a tyrant again. You'd want to high-five him, but he's too busy diagramming constitutions. Across the channel, John Locke calmly insists that the purpose of government is to protect your life, liberty, and property. And if it doesn't, you can totally overthrow it. This idea doesn't just sit in books. It goes airborne. You're in Philadelphia, 1776. A bunch of sweaty guys in wool coats sign a paper saying we're done with King George. It's not just a declaration, it's a mic drop heard around the world. The American Revolution isn't just about taxes. It's about Enlightenment values bursting out into real life, armed with muskets and mottos. And you're standing on the battlefield at Yorktown, where redcoats surrender and a brand new nation stumbles into existence. Historians still debate whether America actually embodied Enlightenment ideals or just selectively applied them while ignoring, slavery and women. Spoiler alert, contradictions are coming. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, things are simmering in France. The Enlightenment has made people very aware that their lives kind of suck. The aristocracy eats cake. The peasants eat mud pies. And then someone mentions the social contract. Now, you're on the streets of Paris, July 14th, 1789. The crowd is swarming the Bastille, tearing down a literal symbol of royal tyranny. You smell gunpowder, sweat, and revolution. The French Revolution doesn't do anything halfway. Heads roll, ideas rise. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen comes out swinging with liberty, equality, fraternity. It's like a remix of Locke and Rousseau, but this time set to the sound of guillotines. People are dancing in the streets, then crying in the streets, then being arrested in the streets. It's chaos. You duck as someone yells about counter-revolutionaries. Out of the smoke walks Maximilien Robespierre, a man with intense eyes and an even more intense love of virtue. Under him, the reign of terror begins. Thousands executed in the name of liberty. It's a weird contradiction. Fight oppression by becoming kind of oppressive? Eventually, Robespierre himself gets the chop. Irony is alive and well. Then comes a short, ambitious guy from Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte. He rides the wave of revolution right into dictatorship, crowns himself emperor, which is, not super enlightenment-y, and then charges across Europe like a boss fight nobody can defeat. You follow him from Austerlitz to Moscow, where he learns the hard way that winter doesn't care how many medals you wear. And then to Waterloo, where he finally meets his end. Twice, actually, because exile wasn't enough the first time. But don't miss the twist. Even as Napoleon tramples monarchies, he spreads Enlightenment laws. The Napoleonic Code becomes the backbone for modern legal systems. So yeah, he's a paradox, a revolutionary tyrant. Back in Britain, they're not burning down palaces. They're building factories and passing reforms, inch by inch. Mary Wollstonecraft writes, "A vindication of the rights of woman," which, surprise, argues that maybe women are people and should have things like education and rights. Radical stuff. And the abolition movement heats up. People like William Wilberforce campaign for years to end the slave trade, and slowly, painfully, they begin to succeed. In Haiti, however, revolution breaks every chain in one seismic boom. You're in 1791, watching Toussaint Louverture lead an uprising against French colonizers. It's the only successful slave revolt that results in a free nation. And it terrifies every slave-owning country on earth. The Enlightenment's promises aren't theoretical anymore. They're real. They're bloody. They're contagious. South America catches the fever next. Enter Simón Bolívar, galloping across mountains and jungles, dreaming of a continent freed from Spanish rule. His journey is full of victories, betrayals, and frustration. But the map changes because of him. By the early 1800s, monarchs are looking nervously over their shoulders. Parliaments are gaining power. Constitutions are being scribbled in dim candlelight across continents. And one thing is clear. The old world is crumbling. But hold on, because not everyone wants pure democracy. Some fear the mob. Some miss the monarchy. Some just want order. So the conservative backlash begins. In 1815, after Napoleon's final defeat, the Congress of Vienna gets together to basically glue Europe back together like a shattered teacup. Their motto? Balance of power. Translation? Keep things stable enough that no one pulls a French Revolution again. But ideas can't be crammed back into boxes. Liberalism, nationalism, socialism, romanticism. The isms are breeding like rabbits, and they're coming for the 19th century with passion and pipe organs. You close the pamphlet, your head spins. Rights, revolutions, republics. It's messy, idealistic, flawed, and incredibly human. The Enlightenment didn't solve everything, but it gave us the language to fight for a better world. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it whispering. You wake up gasping, probably because history just blew out the windows. You thought revolutions were over, that the Enlightenment wrapped things up with a neat bow. But nope, the 19th century is just getting warmed up, and it's about to throw fire, steel, and steam in your face. You're standing in a factory now, not a charming blacksmith's forge. This is a massive, clanging, soot-smothered cathedral of industry. Everything smells like smoke and oil, and the walls sweat with progress. You've entered the Industrial Revolution, and it doesn't care if you're tired. England is ground zero. You blink, and the countryside is gone, replaced by railroads, coal mines, and textile mills spinning faster than your brain on caffeine. Children work 14-hour shifts. You step over puddles of dye and something uncomfortably alive in a Manchester alleyway. Everything's filthy, but there's this buzz in the air, a sense that the world is speeding up like a runaway train. James Watt's steam engine fuels it all. Machines start doing what humans and horses used to, but way faster and without bathroom breaks. This isn't just about gadgets. It's a massive shift in how people live. You're not farming anymore. You're clocking in. You're moving to cities. You're breathing soot. Your life is dictated by a whistle and a wage. Historians still debate whether the Industrial Revolution improved lives or just made people miserable more efficiently. But wait, now you're on a train. Seriously, the steam locomotive is here, and it's wild. You feel like you're moving at light speed. It's like 30 miles per hour, but still, people genuinely believed that going that fast would liquefy your organs. Spoiler, your organs are fine. The economy? Not so much. Prices drop. Trade explodes. Populations double. And cities balloon like overfilled balloons, full of innovation, and also rats. Then Karl Marx walks in. He's got a big beard and bigger ideas. He stares at the smokestacks and writes the Communist Manifesto, declaring that the working class will rise, chains in one hand, destiny in the other. Workers of the world, unite, he says. You have nothing to lose but your lunch breaks. Marx believes that capitalism is a ticking time bomb, that the rich are stacking gold while the poor drown in coal dust. And he's not totally wrong. You see the wealth gaps widening. The mansions on one hill, the slums on the other. Reforms begin to stir. Labor unions form. Factory acts reduce child labor, eventually. But the struggle between bosses and workers becomes the defining tension of modern life. Meanwhile, science is vibing hard. You're in a cramped room with a soft-spoken man sorting beetles. Charles Darwin, fresh off a boat called the Beagle, publishes On the Origin of Species and drops a knowledge nuke: evolution by natural selection. Suddenly, the idea that God created everything in one magical weekend is under review. People lose their minds. Church leaders denounce him, but others whisper, maybe he's onto something. The world feels older, wilder, uncertain. Elsewhere, Michael Faraday fiddles with magnets and discovers how to make electricity dance. Soon, Thomas Edison is lighting streets, and Nikola Tesla is electrocuting everything in sight. including himself, probably. Ideas are colliding like atoms in a lab. Speaking of labs, you're now in Germany, where science gets formal. Chemistry is turning into a profession. Periodic tables appear. Medicine upgrades from leeches to germ theory, thanks to people like Louis Pasteur, who says, maybe wash your hands? Meanwhile, women want in. They've been watching from the sidelines. And frankly, they're done. You meet Sojourner Truth, booming her voice through America. Ain't I a Woman? And Elizabeth Cady Stanton, hosting conventions demanding the vote. Then there's Emmeline Pankhurst, throwing rocks at Parliament windows like it's a revolution, which it kind of is. Suffragettes aren't just asking politely. They're chaining themselves to gates. They're marching. They're force-fed in prison. They are not here for compromise. And then you're at the Crystal Palace in London, 1851. It's the Great Exhibition, a giant glass building full of everything the industrial age has made, from steam-powered carriages to mechanical looms to a full-size fountain that sprays champagne, probably. It's like a flex. Look what mankind can do, the Victorians say, polishing monocles. But not everyone's buying it. Romantics miss nature. They write poems about mountains, paint moody landscapes, and grow their hair long like sad horses. Frankenstein gets published, a love letter to science and a warning at the same time. You nod, because things are moving fast. Maybe too fast. Then you're in Japan. Yeah, we're jumping continents now. It's the Meiji Restoration. And Japan says, okay, we see you, West. Let's modernize. Hard. Samurai shave their heads. Railways appear overnight. The emperor becomes both a sacred symbol and a constitutional monarch. In just a few decades, Japan skips from feudalism to global power, like it's no big deal. Meanwhile, the American Civil War is raging. You hear cannon fire in the distance, the screams of brother fighting brother. And then, Abraham Lincoln, tall and sad-eyed, delivers the Gettysburg Address, short enough to fit in your Instagram caption, but big enough to reshape a nation. Slavery is abolished, but racism doesn't evaporate. It lingers in laws, in institutions, in scars, still visible today. And while the US stitches itself back together, Europe goes full nation state. Italy unifies, thanks to people like Garibaldi, who wears red shirts and wins battles like his farming XP. Germany follows, powered by Otto von Bismarck, a guy who talks like a villain but strategizes like a grandmaster. He unites German states through blood and iron and invents realpolitik, basically chess with cannons. You look up, the flags are multiplying, borders shift. Nationalism becomes a movement and a monster, depending on the day. Now you're in Africa, except you're not really with Africa. You're standing behind European men with maps and mustaches, drawing lines through continents they've never seen, deciding who gets what, like it's a monopoly game. It's the scramble for Africa. Colonialism isn't new, but now it's turbocharged, backed by steamships, rifles, and social Darwinist garbage, like the white man's burden. Indigenous cultures get trampled in the name of railroads and rubber. A quirky detail: Belgium's King Leopold II claims the Congo Free State as his personal property. Not Belgium's, his. Like it's a shiny new bike. The atrocities there will haunt history forever. But colonized people fight back. Rebellions rise. Zulu warriors, Ashanti queens, and others resist with fire and pride. And all the while, immigration explodes. People leave Europe in droves, some to escape famine, some to chase dreams. Ships groan under the weight of hope and desperation. Ellis Island opens. Names get changed. Lives begin again in tenement apartments and prairie farms. You feel it. The whole world pulsing, like something massive is about to rupture. Factories, flags, railroads, revolutions, and one more twist. All this change, all this progress, it's leading to something terrible. But that's for next time. For now, take a breath. The world is on fire, but you're still here, riding shotgun through the storm. You're standing in the middle of a cheerful European square. Open-air cafes, clinking glasses, poets murmuring into notebooks. And you don't even flinch when the first assassination changes everything. It's June 28, 1914, and you're in Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary rolls through town in a fancy open car. The mustache is immaculate. His wife Sophie leans beside him, dressed for a royal outing. It should be a regular photo op, not the starting pistol of World War I. But in the crowd, a teenager named Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, is nervously chewing something. Maybe a sandwich, maybe destiny. His first shot misses. His second doesn't. The crowd screams. The car lurches. And history fractures in slow motion. You wouldn't think a royal couple getting shot would drag the whole world into a firestorm. But Europe has been building a Rube Goldberg machine of alliances, tensions, and loaded rifles for decades. And now, the chain reaction begins. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Russia steps in for Serbia. Germany backs Austria-Hungary. France jumps in. Britain follows. Within weeks, millions are marching to war because one guy got lunch in the wrong place. You blink and the lights of Europe go out. The trenches stretch from the English Channel to Switzerland, slicing France in half like a terrible scar. You're knee-deep in mud. Rats the size of small dogs scurry past your boots. Shells burst overhead, and the sky flashes white-blue. Never black for long. World War I is the worst group project in history. The soldiers don't call it World War I, of course. They just call it the war or the Great War because they think It'll be over by Christmas. It lasts 4 years. Machine guns rip men to ribbons. Barbed wire traps the living and the dead. Mustard gas creeps like a yellow ghost across no man's land. You wear a gas mask that smells like rubber and fear. Historians still debate whether the generals were clueless or just overwhelmed by industrial-scale murder. There are a few breaks. The Christmas truce of 1914 is surreal. You watch British and German soldiers crawl out of the mud, shake hands, and play soccer before going back to killing each other. Then there's the Battle of the Somme, where over 1 million people die in 4 months, and almost nothing changes. You wonder if this is what progress looks like now. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire joins the Central Powers, and the war spreads to the Middle East. You meet T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia, riding camels and blowing up railways with local rebels. The world becomes a battlefield. In Russia, things get extra spicy. Tsar Nicholas II is leading with all the charm of a broken snow globe. His people are starving. His soldiers are freezing. And in the background, a mystic named Rasputin is creepily whispering advice and refusing to die, no matter how often he's poisoned or shot. Then Vladimir Lenin enters the chat, smuggled in by the Germans like a secret weapon in a sealed train car. He promises peace, land, and bread. The Bolsheviks take over, and suddenly, Russia is out of the war and into a revolution. The Tsar is gone. The Romanovs executed. Russia becomes the world's first communist state, and everything changes. Again. Back on the Western Front, America joins the war in 1917. You hear the speeches about freedom and democracy, but it's mostly because of unrestricted submarine warfare and a suspicious telegram offering Mexico parts of the US in exchange for joining the fight. President Woodrow Wilson arrives with a neatly trimmed mustache and 14 points for peace. He wants to make the world safe for democracy. The French mostly want revenge. The war ends on November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m. after 16 million deaths and twice that number wounded. You're standing in the mud when the guns go silent. It's too quiet. The silence screams louder than the shells ever did. The Treaty of Versailles follows. It blames Germany for the whole thing, demands reparations, and redraws borders like a kid with a crayon. It's not a peace treaty. It's a pressure cooker with a 20-year timer. Back in Germany, people queue for bread with wheelbarrows full of cash. Hyperinflation turns savings into wallpaper. The Weimar Republic tries to stay upright, but it's like tap dancing on quicksand. Out of the dust, a small man with a loud voice starts yelling in beer halls. His name? Adolf Hitler. But let's park him for now. In America, things look great. You're in the roaring 20s now, sipping a fizzy drink in a jazz club. Flappers swing their beads. Radios croon out the latest hits. Cars zoom past. Everything feels fast, loud, and full of promise. But that's the problem. October 29th, 1929. Black Tuesday. The stock market crashes, and suddenly, everything is underwater. Banks collapse. Unemployment explodes. Breadlines stretch for blocks. Dust storms sweep across the Midwest. It's not just a recession, it's the Great Depression. People jump out of windows. Kids go hungry. You feel the bottom drop out of hope itself. Everywhere, extremes gain traction. Communism, fascism, nationalism. People want strong answers to terrifying questions. FDR in America rolls out the New Deal, jobs programs, reforms, hope with a side of bureaucracy. You build dams and listen to fireside chats. Meanwhile, in Germany, Hitler is now chancellor. He promises jobs, pride, and a return to greatness. He also promises revenge. Across the world, empires crack. In India, a skinny man in glasses spins thread and leads marches. Mahatma Gandhi wants independence without violence. He's jailed, beaten, and still walks like he's already free. And in China, a civil war bubbles. Nationalists, communists, warlords. It's a three-way mess. You duck bullets and wonder how this will end. But that answer comes later. For now, you feel it again. The tremor in the timeline. Like something big is rumbling just beneath the ground. You survived the Great War, but the next one, you probably won't. You're somewhere in Poland, but it doesn't really matter, because the borders won't hold for long. It's September 1st, 1939, and the sky is full of screaming planes. You can't see the pilots, just black crosses painted on steel wings, and a hot trail of bombs falling like steel rain. Tanks roar past shattered houses. Boots crush glass and ash. Hitler has invaded, and World War II has begun. It happened so fast. Blitzkrieg, lightning war, they call it. And it feels exactly like that. Germany steamrolls Poland, while the Soviets creep in from the east. Britain and France declare war, but do almost nothing. There's a strange, eerie pause called the phony war, where everyone's technically fighting, but the guns aren't firing yet. Then in 1940, the storm breaks. You're in France, and within 6 weeks, the Germans are sipping champagne in Paris. The French surrender, the British retreat at Dunkirk, and the only thing standing between Hitler and total domination is a small island with tea and radar. The Battle of Britain is brutal. You're crouched in the London Underground, listening to bombs drop overhead like thunder made of iron. Children are evacuated. Whole city blocks vanish in flames. And yet, somehow, the Brits hold on. Churchill growls on the radio, "We shall never surrender." Meanwhile, Hitler does something even Napoleon wouldn't try. He turns east and invades the Soviet Union in 1941. Operation Barbarossa. It's a mistake. You freeze with the German troops in the Russian winter. Their boots disintegrate. Their rifles jam. The snow doesn't care. Stalin, paranoid and brutal, throws millions into the fight. The battle for Stalingrad becomes a grinder of flesh and steel. Historians still debate whether the turning point of the war happened there, in the frozen ruins by the Volga. Then, December 7, 1941, you're in Pearl Harbor when Japanese planes screech across the Hawaiian sky. Battleships explode like toys in a bathtub. Over 2,400 people die in a single morning. America joins the war the next day. Now it's truly global. There's fighting in North Africa, where General Rommel and Montgomery play chess with tanks. There's horror in China, where the Japanese occupation leaves villages in ruin. There's resistance in the jungles of Burma, in the streets of Warsaw, in the mountains of Yugoslavia. You feel like the whole world is on fire, and you're just trying to breathe. Back in Europe, you watch as the Holocaust unfolds in unthinkable detail. Cattle cars, barbed wire, the hiss of gas, the silence of mass graves. The world will need decades just to find the words. In the Pacific, it's island after island. Midway, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima. The Japanese fight to the last man. Kamikaze pilots dive like burning birds. You're on a boat for months, praying you'll live long enough to smell land again. In 1944, hope lands on a beach in Normandy. It's D-Day, and the water is red. Allied troops storm the coast under machine gun fire and crashing shells. You crawl through sand and shrapnel, heart pounding like it's trying to escape your chest. Somehow, you break through. Paris is liberated. The Allies push east. The Soviets push west. Berlin gets crushed in a vice. Hitler hides in a bunker. He marries Eva Braun. Then they die together, April 30th, 1945. A week later, Germany surrenders. But the war's not over yet. Japan refuses to yield. Cities burn under firebombs. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya. Then President Harry Truman approves a weapon that could split the sky. August 6, 1945. Hiroshima. You're miles away, and still, the flash blinds you. 3 days later, Nagasaki. The mushroom clouds rise. The buildings vanish. So do the shadows. 200,000 people dead within weeks. Survivors, known as hibakusha, live with scars that never heal. Japan surrenders. World War II is over. More than 70 million people are dead. Cities are dust. Families are gone. And everyone who lived through it is different now. But the peace feels uneasy. Germany gets split in half. So does Berlin. A wall rises to divide East and West, democracy and communism. In the East, Stalin tightens his grip. In the West, America tries to hold everything together with jazz and the Marshall Plan. The United Nations is born, an attempt to prevent this ever happening again. But you can already feel the chill creeping in. The Cold War begins. There's no shooting, not yet. But the weapons, they're much, much bigger now. The US and the USSR stare each other down like gods with itchy trigger fingers. Nuclear bombs are the new swords, and mutually assured destruction is the only thing keeping everyone alive. In America, you duck under school desks in nuclear drills. In Russia, people listen for the sound of bombers that never come. In between, there's espionage, propaganda, and satellites. Sputnik beeps from orbit in 1957, and suddenly the space race begins. But Earth is far from peaceful. In Korea, you watch the first Cold War proxy war burn hot. North versus South. Capitalism versus communism. The war ends in 1953 with the same border it started with, and millions of lives lost. In the Middle East, borders drawn by tired colonialists start to crack. Oil becomes currency, and conflict becomes routine. In India, Gandhi's dream of peaceful independence comes true in 1947, but it's soaked in blood. Partition splits the subcontinent into India and Pakistan. Over 1 million die. Trains arrive full of corpses. Families tear apart. And then there's Israel, declared a state in 1948, a homeland for the Jews, born out of the ashes of the Holocaust. But for Palestinians, it feels like displacement and betrayal. The region erupts, and it won't calm down anytime soon. Everywhere, the world is reshaping. Empires collapse like tired stage sets. Vietnam, Algeria, Kenya, Congo. Countries break free of European rule, but the scars are deep. Some gain independence through ballots, others through war. You hear a voice on the radio. It's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talking about dreams and justice and the long arc of the moral universe. In America, the civil rights movement is gaining speed. Back in Germany, something is happening again. Not with guns, but with guilt, with remembrance, with rebuilding. You walk through Dachau, and the silence is absolute. A sign reads, "Never again." You hope the world is listening. The baby boomers are growing up. Jazz is becoming rock and roll. Someone invents the microchip, and you don't even realize the future is being born in a box the size of a shoebox. The Cold War simmers. The world is tense. But for a moment, for a heartbeat, there's just enough breathing room. You survived the war. The world survived itself. But the next revolution? It won't be fought with tanks. It'll be fought with ideas. You're in a kitchen in the 1950s, surrounded by chrome appliances, pastel-colored countertops, and the sharp scent of hairspray. Elvis is on the radio. Somewhere out there, a milkman still delivers. Everything feels clean, controlled, and just a little too perfect. But underneath that glossy surface, rebellion is simmering. You're about to watch the post-war enlightenment shake the planet, not with gunfire, but with revolution in thought, identity, and expression. Let's start with existentialism. You're sitting in a dimly lit Paris cafe. Everyone smokes. No one smiles. A man in a black turtleneck tells you, life has no inherent meaning. That's Jean-Paul Sartre, and he's not kidding. This is post-Holocaust Europe. The old rules broke. People are done pretending there's a grand plan. So what do you do when life feels absurd? You choose. You define yourself. You make your own meaning. Or so Sartre says, while Albert Camus nods and sips his coffee like he's already made peace with the void. In America, the mood's a little different. It's the 1960s. You've got a flower in your hair, a peace sign on your van, and a whole lot of questions. The counterculture explodes. Hippies, civil rights, feminism, anti-war protests. People are marching, dancing, burning bras, and demanding to be heard. It's not just about politics. It's a philosophical insurrection. You're at Berkeley, watching Mario Savio stand on top of a police car, shouting about freedom of speech. You're in Washington, D.C., when Dr. King delivers the "I Have a Dream" speech. You're in Stonewall, New York, where the LGBTQ+ community finally fights back. Even science joins the revolution. You watch the Earth rise over the moon's horizon in 1968, thanks to Apollo 8. And suddenly, everything feels small. The blue marble photo hits like a punch to the soul. There it is, your planet. Fragile, beautiful, alone in a sea of black. In 1969, you land on the moon with Neil Armstrong. One small step, and the entire world stops breathing for a moment. Back home, still chaos. The Vietnam War is dragging on. You hear body counts on the nightly news, like baseball scores. Napalm, Agent Orange, the Tet Offensive. Protests swell across the world. Some burn draft cards. Some move to Canada. Some just stare at their television and wonder if the world has gone insane. Meanwhile, there's another war. Quiet, invisible, and terrifying. The Cold War is now a chess match of espionage and ideology. You spy on spies. You tap phones. You watch the Berlin Wall go up in 1961. Then nearly see the world end in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 days, you genuinely think nuclear war might happen at any second. Spoiler, it doesn't. But that fear, it never really leaves. And then comes the sexual revolution. It's the 1970s now, and you're hearing words like liberation, choice, pleasure, tossed around like confetti, birth control pills, Roe v. Wade. The personal is political, and your body is no longer just a cultural battlefield. You're reclaiming it. Technology joins the rebellion too. You hold your breath as a new kind of nerd walks into the picture. His name's Steve Jobs, and he tells you computers are for everyone. Not just governments, not just scientists, everyone. That beige box on your desk, it's going to change the world. Meanwhile, back in academia, another shift. You hear terms like postmodernism and deconstruction, where the line between truth and story starts to blur. You read Foucault and Derrida, and suddenly, knowledge itself becomes suspect. Who controls history? Who gets to speak? Who benefits from the truth? Historians still debate whether postmodernism liberated human thought or just made everyone tired and confused. Probably both. In Africa, Asia, and Latin America, newly independent nations are redefining identity, their own versions of enlightenment. You witness Pan-Africanism, negritude, Bolivarian revolutions, and the rising voices of authors, artists, and thinkers once silenced by empire. In South Africa, apartheid is cracking under pressure. The prison doors creak open in 1990, and out walks Nelson Mandela, fist raised, smile calm, soul unbroken. A philosopher of forgiveness, wearing a politician's suit. And in China, you're standing in Tiananmen Square, 1989. Students chant for reform, for rights, for something more. A man in a white shirt stands in front of a tank, just stands there, still, silent. You feel time stop, but the tank doesn't. The revolution is televised and then censored. Yet the world has changed. The Berlin Wall falls. One by one, communist regimes collapse. The Soviet Union itself dissolves in 1991, like sand between fingers. You look around, and for the first time in decades, there's no Cold War. So what now? The 1990s arrive with a strange optimism. The internet begins its quiet conquest. Walls fall, borders blur. You send your first email. You hear about a place called Silicon Valley, where millionaires wear hoodies, but something's off. In Rwanda, 1994, a genocide unfolds while the world barely blinks. In Yugoslavia, ethnic wars unravel decades of uneasy peace. The Enlightenment was never evenly distributed. You feel the future coming, but it's jagged, uneven, loud. Still, the ideals survive. Freedom, expression, justice, equity. These aren't just buzzwords. They're the echoes of every thinker, protester, writer, and rebel who dared to imagine a better way to live. So here you are, at the edge of the 21st century. Wiser, cautious, hopeful, maybe a little overwhelmed. You don't know what's next, but you do know this. The revolution didn't end. It became your daily life. It's the early 2000s. You're staring at a glowing screen. You hear the weird dial-up tone. Maybe you've just installed AOL. Maybe your MySpace layout is glitching again. Or maybe, just maybe, you've stumbled onto something much bigger than memes and cat videos. Welcome to the digital enlightenment. But first, let's rewind a second. Because before you can fully grasp what's happening, you need to understand one thing. You're not just a reader anymore. You're a participant. You're uploading, downloading, forwarding, canceling, reacting. The revolution isn't in the streets. It's in your pocket, and it starts with code. It's 2004. A Harvard kid named Mark Zuckerberg launches a scrappy little site called Facebook. It's exclusive, it's messy, it's addictive. You're not just surfing the web anymore. You are the web. Every like, every post, every photo of your brunch becomes part of something vast. Information explodes. You can access the entire library of Alexandria with one Google search. But there's a catch. Everyone has a voice, sure, but not everyone has the truth. Now, you need to filter signal from noise. Historians still debate whether this information age is a new enlightenment or just a dopamine-fueled echo chamber. But one thing's certain, the genie is out. Let's get political. It's 2011. You're in Cairo's Tahrir Square. Not physically, you're watching it unfold on Twitter. Protesters light up your feed. Hashtags become rallying cries. Arab Spring, governments fall, dictators sweat. Social media isn't just for selfies anymore. It's an engine of uprising. But don't celebrate too soon. Some revolutions fizzle. Others get hijacked. The dream of freedom clashes with surveillance, censorship, and authoritarian clawbacks. Democracy is not a guarantee. It's an ongoing experiment. And you're now a lab rat with Wi-Fi. Meanwhile, the Enlightenment's oldest promise, science, is entering warp speed. You hold in your hand a phone more powerful than the computers that sent astronauts to the moon. You track hurricanes in real time. You map your genome. You get updates from Mars rovers while standing in line for coffee. And speaking of Mars, it's 2020. A red rocket touches down. A new billionaire space race is underway. This time, not for flags or Cold War points, but because the ultra-rich might literally want to leave Earth. You think about Galileo, about Newton, and wonder what they'd think of a Tesla Roadster orbiting the sun. But for all the progress, the ancient questions remain. Who are you? Why are you here? How do you live with others in peace? Cue the 21st century's biggest social reckonings. You're in Ferguson, Missouri, as the Black Lives Matter movement begins. You're hearing the names: Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. The Enlightenment's promise of universal rights is being interrogated. Who has truly been included? Who has always been left out? You march again. You shout again. You think about Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and every voice history tried to erase. Their words now roar through podcasts, classrooms, tweets, protest signs. The conversation is no longer optional. Then comes a virus. It's early 2020. You're wiping down groceries, staying inside, learning what an N95 mask is. COVID-19 shuts down the planet, and suddenly, Enlightenment values are put to the test in the strangest way possible. Trust in science versus fear, doubt, and conspiracy. You binge-watch charts. You argue about vaccines. You realize that progress isn't just about discovery. It's about communication, about collective action, about being willing to listen to people in lab coats instead of people shouting on YouTube. Still, people resist. Some say the virus isn't real. Some say it's engineered. Some say wearing a mask is oppression. It's not just a pandemic. It's a philosophical stress test. What do we believe? Why do we believe it? And who gets to be the authority? It's 2022. A telescope named James Webb sends back images so ancient they predate stars as you understand them. You see galaxies colliding, time stretching, light bending. You're staring at the edges of existence from the palm of your hand. Meanwhile, ChatGPT appears. Hi. AI is suddenly writing poems, painting portraits, solving math problems, and, if you're being honest, kinda creeping you out. You start asking new questions. Not, what is the soul, but what does it mean to be conscious? Not what is beauty, but can a machine feel it? Not what is freedom, but what happens when the algorithm decides for me. The Enlightenment is no longer about muskets, salons, or powdered wigs. It's about the quiet tension between your thumb and your screen. You exist in an age where everyone has a platform and no one agrees. Where truth is slippery and the future is coded in JavaScript. Where you're both creator and consumer, skeptic and believer, disciple and rebel. The Enlightenment never ended. It just uploaded itself. But here's the twist. Despite the chaos, the confusion, the late-night doom scrolling, there's still a spark. You see it in climate activists risking arrest, in indie journalists broadcasting truth from bunkers, in teenagers coding apps to help their communities, in open source education, in universal design, in decolonized libraries, in conversations that would have been burned as heresy centuries ago. You're part of the most connected, distracted, empowered generation in human history. You can call out tyranny in real time. You can crowdsource cures. You can hold corporations accountable with a hashtag. You can learn philosophy while brushing your teeth. But knowledge is no longer scarce. It's overwhelming. So now, it's not just about seeking truth. It's about learning how to breathe inside the storm. And maybe, just maybe, pass on some wisdom without starting a flame war. You're tired, but stay with me. The world is spinning faster, not slower. Every second, new knowledge bursts into the stream like fireworks in a thunderstorm. Some of it beautiful, some of it blinding, and some of it dangerously misleading. Welcome to the final sprint of modernity. The Enlightenment has collided with revolution after revolution, and it turns out we're still not done rewriting the rules. You're in Hong Kong. It's 2019. You're marching with umbrellas, not because it's raining, but because umbrellas are now symbols of resistance against surveillance, against censorship, against a system that demands silence. You paint protest art on post-it notes, you chant in shopping malls, you vanish into crowds, drones buzz overhead, then you're in Tehran, then Santiago, then Minneapolis. The tools of protest, encrypted messaging, viral hashtags, live streams, look eerily like the tools of leisure. Your entertainment is now entangled with your ethics. This isn't your ancestors' revolution. You don't storm palaces. You storm comment sections. You don't barricade streets. You log off or log on harder. But the danger is very real. In Myanmar, internet blackouts precede massacres. In Russia, online dissent earns you years in a penal colony. In China, digital scores dictate your access to society. The Enlightenment ideal of free expression under siege. Historians still debate whether the digital revolution has enhanced democracy or cracked it wide open. Because the thing about revolutions is, they don't always go the way you planned. Let's talk about deep fakes. Let's talk about truth itself. You're scrolling, as always, and you see a video of a world leader saying something outrageous. You laugh, you share, but later you find out it was fake. A synthetic voice, a sculpted face, a pixelated lie dressed up in pixels of trust. Now you're suspicious of everything. That's not freedom. That's exhaustion. Cognitive overload. But here comes a different kind of revolution. Climate reality. The Enlightenment prized reason and observation, right? Well, nothing's screaming louder than the planet right now. Forests are burning. Oceans are acidifying. Permafrost is belching methane like some burping beast from the underworld. You're in Australia. Smoke blackens the skies for weeks. You're in California. The hills turn to ash. You're in Bangladesh. The water never stops rising. Suddenly, the philosophy of individual rights hits a wall, the literal wall of nature, flooding back. Enlightenment thinkers once said that man was master of his world. You're not so sure anymore. Here's the irony. You know more than ever, and yet it feels like you can do less than ever. You're told to recycle, to go vegan, to buy carbon credits. But the largest forces, corporate emissions, political inertia, short-term greed, laugh in the face of your tote bag. So now you ask, is this a failure of the Enlightenment, or just the price of ignoring its darker sides? Because here's something those 18th century philosophers didn't always admit. Their utopias were built on conquest, on empire, on slavery, on silence. And if you want a real revolution, you need to unearth the foundations and name the ghosts beneath the floorboards. You're in a classroom. Your teacher plays a documentary about colonialism. But the school board says it's divisive. A parent demands it be banned. A governor signs a bill. A teacher gets fired. Ideas are dangerous again. The pendulum swings back and forth. And still you learn. You read Baldwin, bell hooks, Arendt, Zuboff. You listen to indigenous scientists, neurodivergent artists, queer theorists. You realize that enlightenment isn't a one-size-fits-all flashlight. It's a messy constellation. And now you're trying to light the way with everyone's stories. Not just those written in Latin and printed on fancy European presses. You're building a new vocabulary. Not just progress, but justice. Not just freedom, but belonging. Not just reason, but reconciliation. It's exhausting, it's imperfect, but it's alive. Let's jump forward. It's 2040. You're older now. Or your grandkid is the one listening. The air smells different. The economy runs on something you can't see. You might have a neural interface in your temple. Or maybe you rejected it and live off-grid in a retrofitted yurt, growing hydroponic tomatoes. But the questions are the same. What makes a life worth living? Can we be equal and free? Can we build a society without scapegoats? Back in the 1700s, Rousseau wrote that man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. You think maybe the chains today are made of code. You think maybe they're still made of fear, but maybe, just maybe, they're breakable. So you get up, you write something, you vote, you plant a tree, you teach a kid, you build a tool. You apologize. You imagine. You fail. You try again. Because the real enlightenment doesn't come from a book or a law or a machine. It comes from the quiet moment when you choose to care, even when nobody's watching. The real revolution isn't in the streets or the hashtags or even in history books. It's in the next conversation you have with a stranger, in the courage to say, "I don't know," in the whisper that becomes a movement. You turn off your screen, you look out the window, and for a second, the world looks possible. You're not asleep yet. Good. This part, right here, this is the one nobody wants to write, because this is where it all starts looping in on itself. Enlightenment, revolution, reform, backlash, repeat. The age of reason tried to lift the fog, but somehow, you're still squinting in the dark, wondering if the shadows are coming from the past or from the flashlight in your own hand. You're in post-war Europe, and you're starting over from rubble. The Enlightenment gave you the idea of individual liberty. The 20th century gave you barbed wire and mushroom clouds. Auschwitz, Hiroshima, entire cities leveled in the name of progress. The very machines designed to free labor now mass-produce death. The scientists who once studied stars now split atoms. And suddenly, the rational mind is on trial. You wake up in 1945. There are tribunals and treaties and a newly formed United Nations. But there's also silence, a deep global hush, because everyone's asking the same question. How did we let this happen? Historians still debate whether Enlightenment ideals were betrayed by fascism, or whether they carried a seed of authoritarianism all along. Maybe too much faith in order turns into goose-stepping. Maybe the dream of universal truth forgets who's doing the defining. You stare at the documents. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt holding it up like scripture. The Geneva Conventions. The Nuremberg Code. And for a while, it feels like maybe, just maybe, we learned something. You're born into the Cold War. Two titans rise, the capitalist West and the communist East. They each claim the legacy of the Enlightenment. The West champions liberty, markets, and free expression. The East swears by equality, workers, and rational planning. Both build space rockets. Both teach kids to fear the other side. You live under the threat of annihilation. Again. But now, it's symmetrical. And yet, the revolution doesn't stop. It just moves inward. You're in Paris, 1968. Students and workers flood the streets. They scrawl graffiti on the walls. Sous les pavés, la plage, beneath the paving stones, the beach. You're throwing bricks, but dreaming of sand. Your parents think you're nuts. Your professors are secretly jealous. That same year, in the US, Dr. King is assassinated, and Robert Kennedy, and the Vietnam War grinds on. Protests flare like brush fires. Anti-war, civil rights, women's liberation. And once again, the Enlightenment's tidy categories fall apart, because you're not just a man, or a citizen, or a rational agent. You're also black, queer, poor, undocumented, disabled. And the system built on reason hasn't made room for all of you. Enter postmodernism, a philosophical party you definitely weren't invited to, but you show up anyway, wearing existential doubt and a sarcastic grin. Suddenly, grand narratives are out. Truth is slippery, language is power, and everything is a construct. The philosophers, Foucault, Derrida, Lyotard, they take the Enlightenment apart with tweezers. They don't burn it. They deconstruct it. They ask, who gets to decide what's universal? What voices were edited out? And why are you trusting logic when logic built the guillotine? It's a head trip. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is still moving. You're in India, where a democratic experiment stumbles forward after colonial rule. In Algeria, where revolution kicks out the French. In South Africa, where apartheid starts to crack. Everywhere, the Enlightenment is being reinterpreted through new eyes. Brown eyes, indigenous eyes, post-colonial eyes. It's messy, it's glorious, it's loud. The revolution, you realize, doesn't have one accent. It speaks in pidgin and protest and poetry. You're in Berlin, 1989. The wall falls like paper. The Cold War ends, not with a bang, but with David Hasselhoff singing awkwardly in a light-up jacket. Capitalism declares victory. Democracy, we're told, has finally won. And for a hot second, people believe it. You're told the future is frictionless. Borders will blur. Technology will liberate us all. The market will regulate itself. History, famously, is over. Spoiler, it's not. Welcome to 9/11. Planes hit towers. Worldviews shatter. Everything shifts. You're now living in the surveillance enlightenment, where reason is used to justify drones and data collection, and revolution moves to the cloud. The social media age begins. At first, it's all cat videos and new emojis. But soon, you're watching Arab Spring unfold live on Twitter. Dictators fall. Hope surges, then it crashes. Civil wars erupt. Refugee crises explode. The same tech that liberated also polarizes. Feeds become echo chambers. The public square turns into a battlefield of bots and bad faith. Your brain, it's tired. And yet, the revolution keeps mutating. You're in Occupy Wall Street. Then Black Lives Matter. Then Me Too. Then Extinction Rebellion. Each one picks up where the Enlightenment left off, then adds its own flair, its own fury. You're marching not just for liberty, but for intersectionality. Not just free speech, but restorative justice. You're writing manifestos on Medium. You're organizing over Discord. You're learning that history doesn't repeat, but it does remix. And through it all, you start to wonder, is the Enlightenment dead, or is it evolving? Because here's the twist. The revolution wasn't about finishing the Enlightenment. It was about unfolding it over centuries, across continents, with countless edits and footnotes and fierce debates. It's like that old idea from Kant, sapere aude, dare to know, but knowing, it's not just reading books anymore. It's listening, it's unlearning, it's asking who got left out and why. You stand now on a strange edge. Your screen glows. Your city burns. Your neighbor posts conspiracy theories. Your niece marches for climate action. Your grandfather scrolls TikTok with one eye and watches Fox News with the other. Everything is in flux, and yet you're here, still asking, still caring, still daring. And maybe that's what revolution really is. And so, here we are, final stretch. Your eyelids are heavy, the air's a little cooler. Maybe you've got a cat snoring on your lap. But don't go drifting off just yet. Because if the last few 100 years have taught you anything, it's this. History never ends. You're living in the aftermath of all that rebellion, all that thinking, all that chaos disguised as clarity. And while the world hasn't exactly become the glowing utopia that Enlightenment thinkers imagined, it's also not the fireball of doom some 20th century pessimists predicted. It's both. It's neither. It's complicated. Let's zoom out. In theory, this was supposed to be the age of reason. But you're standing in the middle of an age where truth is negotiable, facts feel optional, and algorithms decide what you believe before you even believe it. It's like Descartes meets clickbait. I think, therefore I am, you whisper. Then your phone vibrates, and you forget what you were saying. And yet, reason isn't gone. It's just buried under noise. You still read, you still argue, you still try to make sense of your place in a 24-hour news cycle and a world that seems to shift every 6 minutes. Let's walk back a bit though. Look at what you inherited. You have elections, not perfect, but real. You can read what you want, tweet what you want, protest, critique, create. You have medicine, sanitation, vaccines, telescopes. You can question God and not get burned for it. You can imagine alternate futures and build them. That's the Enlightenment's ghost. Still haunting, still humming. But ghosts evolve too. You've probably noticed how every new generation redefines revolution. For some, it's smashing the system. For others, it's building a new one. And for others, still, it's just surviving with dignity. So, you begin to wonder, how much of this dream is still alive? And more importantly, how much of it is still yours? Let's talk about education. You think you're in school to pass tests, write essays, check boxes. But actually, you're sitting inside centuries of ideas, fighting for space in your brain. You're grappling with Plato and Bacon and Mary Wollstonecraft and Frederick Douglass and Simone de Beauvoir. And yeah, probably a few dead white guys, but also a few living voices who've rewritten the rules. Knowledge isn't just passed down, it's fought over, reframed, updated like a buggy app. And every time you question something, really question it, you're part of that process. Historians still debate whether this grand Enlightenment project actually changed the world, or if it just gave new words to old hierarchies. But that's the thing with debates. You can join them. You probably already have. Now, let's look at what's ahead. Climate change. Yeah, sorry to bring it up this late at night, but it's the biggest revolution no one wanted. The planet's changing faster than the laws built to protect it. And once again, science steps up to speak truth. But this time, it's not enough to be right. You have to be heard. You have to build systems that care. You have to convince people who don't want to be convinced. So maybe the Enlightenment wasn't just about reason. Maybe it was also about empathy. Back in the 18th century, people believed we could solve everything with logic. Today, we know logic alone doesn't cut it. You need stories. You need emotion. You need community. You need art and love and humor and weird little podcasts and memes that make you think too hard at 3 a.m. So where does that leave you? Here, in the mess. Not with a clean answer, not with a final chapter, but with a flashlight and a question. What now? You close the book, not to end it, but to write your part. You breathe in a history made of revolutions, contradictions, half-built dreams. And maybe, just maybe, you start to believe that the point was never to reach the end. The point was to keep going through the smoke and the scrolls, through the barricades and the ballots, through the silence of censored books and the noise of trending hashtags. This isn't the end of the revolution. It's your turn. Turn off the screen. Close your eyes. But don't forget what you've seen, because history before bed isn't just a story. It's a warning and a dare. Sapere aude. Dare to know. Dare to change. Dare to rest, so you can wake up and begin again. Post Part 20. Recap. Final summary. 300 words. So, you made it. Through centuries of ink-stained fingers, powdered wigs, prison cells, and coffeehouse arguments. From the flickering candlelight of Renaissance Florence to the electric hum of a world where every revolution now streams in 4K. The Renaissance lit the fuse. Artists broke walls. Scientists poked the heavens. And thinkers dared to say, what if we're wrong? Then came the Reformation's fire, the printing press's ink-fueled panic, and a long parade of monarchs, revolutionaries, and heretics who rewrote what it meant to know, and who was allowed to say it out loud. But the Enlightenment didn't gift you perfection. It handed you a blueprint and a challenge. It dared you to reason, to rebel, to rethink. And revolutions? They didn't stop in 1789. They just changed costume. Today's battles for justice, truth, climate, equity are sequels. Messier, louder, more digital. History didn't end. It just handed you the mic. So, what did this whole sleepy journey teach you? That no freedom is ever final. That ideas are contagious. That books can be banned but not erased. That power always gets uncomfortable when questioned. That revolution isn't a moment. It's a muscle. And maybe, just maybe, that bedtime stories can carry the weight of empires and still whisper you to sleep. So, turn out the lights. Leave the past behind, but only just a little. Because in the morning, you're not just waking up. You're picking up where they left off. End of script. Good night.